The Haunting of Lancaster 3. A New Stronghold, by James Griffin. The following story is a work of fiction. Names, characters, events, and incidents are the products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Copyright 2024 by James D. Griffin. All rights reserved. No part of this story may be reproduced or used in any manner without written permission of the copyright owner except with the use of quotations in a story review. Chapter 1. The Manifestation. The small ranch-style home, located on the north side of Walnut Street in the city of Claremore, with its almost muted atmosphere, along with the darkness that envelopes it, appears to be vacant, despite the fact that the recently widowed Emily Rose still resides there. Reportedly, Emily's neighbors haven't seen her around town since her husband's funeral, and when one of them does stop by the house to check on her, Emily lacks the hospitable, loving demeanor that she has always had. It seems that Emily isolated herself out of depression, with no desire to be bothered by well-wishers. The only frequent visitor that she does still have is her daughter Julia. But even Julia is not feeling as welcome as she once did. Then, late one night, as Emily lays in bed, wide awake, hating the world and those fortunate enough to still be in it, she sees a small, bright orb that suddenly appears near her footboard. Emily, seeing the light of the orb, raises up, pinning herself against the bed's headboard, trying to distance herself from what she is seeing, but then the orb slowly begins to expand, taking an almost human form, allowing Emily to see what she desires most: the figure of her late husband Ernie, standing there, smiling down at her. With tears in her eyes, Emily moves near the specter of her late husband when, in a voice of anger, the ghostly apparition cries out, "No, don't touch me." Then, using the words of Jesus found in John chapter 20 verses 17, the specter continues, "For I am not yet ascended to my Father." Emily jumps back, wiping tears from her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ernie, I was just so excited to see you again. When will you be going to heaven? I mean, the Bible says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, 2 Corinthians 5 verse 8, so I assumed that you were already in heaven. The Bible says a lot of things, many of which are not true." The specter yells angrily. "What?" Emily asks, nearly panic-stricken. "But we always believed the Bible, and now you tell me that it shouldn't be trusted?" The form of light begins to intensify, its brightness filling Emily's room, yet rather than providing a soothing warmth as one would expect, its heat cuts into Emily's flesh, bringing her an intense pain. "Don't ever question me again," the specter demands, as Emily cowers in her bed screaming in agony. A neighbor, seeing the light coming from Emily's home, and hearing her screams, dials 911. Within seconds a city patrol vehicle pulls up outside. The light coming from inside of the house shines so brightly that the officer shields his eyes from it. Then, hearing a scream, the police officer picks up his radio and calls for backup. Once backup is on its way, the officer approaches the front door, banging his fist against it, calling out, identifying himself as a police officer. As a second scream comes from inside, the officer smashes the front door open with a quick kick. Entering the residence, he draws his weapon, calling out, "This is the police. Mrs. Rose, are you okay? Are you alone? I need you to come to me," slowly with your hands extended out from your sides. The specter from inside of Emily's room, hearing the officer's voice, suddenly disappears, taking with it the intense heat and light that was causing Emily so much pain. Emily, in a fit of rage, storms into the living room, infuriated that her Ernie has been taken from her once again, and instantly sets in on the officer. "What do you think you are doing? You kicked in my door. You threatened me. And for what? Because I was using an old-school 100-watt light bulb and had the volume on my television turned up too high?" "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that was not a light bulb or a television. I heard you screaming as if you were in pain." "You heard my television, officer. You know, the one that I turned off when you came storming in." Other officers are now on the scene. One of them is Sergeant Dale Austin, who does his best to pacify Mrs. Rose. "Ma'am, I am terribly sorry to have disturbed you tonight. We will secure your front door, and I'll have a repairman here first thing in the morning, have it permanently fixed." "Thank you," Mrs. Rose says sharply, at first looking at Sergeant Austin, but then redirecting her gaze back to Officer Ellis, who had been the responding officer to her home. Once the police leave her residence, Mrs. Rose goes back to her bedroom, pulling a Ouija board out from under her bed. Emily would never have touched one of these boards back in the day, for as a Christian, she knew the evil that these boards represent, but since she lost her husband, she has been doing everything that she can to make contact with him. Chapter 2: A Town Redeemed. The city of Lancaster, despite its horrific history, has become a rather quiet community, for with the defeat of the demon Agramon and the demolition of the Bradbury mansion, Lancaster has put aside its paranormal past, replacing it with the tranquility of small-town America. It's as if the only remnant of Lancaster's bygone days is Cody, the demon Agramon's arch-nemesis, and the only son of Michael and Debbie Newman. Cody is now serving as the assistant pastor of the Secret Place Fellowship Church. Pastor Alex Holt, Cody Newman's mentor and his pastor, is delivering his Sunday sermon when one of the ushers, a Mr. Edward Harden, approaches Cody, who is seated on the third row, amongst the congregation. "Excuse me, Pastor Newman, there is a woman that is asking to speak with you." Cody glances over his shoulder, and he sees a young woman that he is not familiar with standing just inside the church's main entrance. "Thank you," Cody says to Mr. Harden as he stands to his feet. As he does, Cody brushes his wife's shoulder and he motions for her to follow him, and then they proceed to the church foyer. When they arrive, Cody extends his right hand to the young woman, and as if an introduction says, "Good morning, this is my wife Kathryn, is there something that we can do for you?" "Are you Cody Newman?" Julia, Emily Rose's daughter, asks abruptly. "Yes, ma'am," Cody responds politely. "I am so sorry to disturb you," Julia says, getting her frustration under control. "I wouldn't normally interrupt a church service, but I'm afraid that I'm kind of in a rush. You see, I've had to leave my mother home alone, so I have to get back to her as quickly as possible." "Oh, I am so sorry," Kathryn responds caringly. "Is your mother sick?" "No, I wish she were just sick. I'm afraid that she's demon-possessed," Julia responds, nearly breaking. "She's what?" Cody asks, as if he were unsure of what Julia had just said. "Demon-possessed," Julia repeats slowly. "I'm assuming that you're familiar with the problem?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm very familiar with the problem," Cody replies apologetically. "I'm sorry if I came across as skeptical, you just caught me off guard." "It's okay," Julia responds. "If someone had said the same thing to me just a few days ago, I would have thought they were crazy." Cody and Kathryn escort Julia to Cody's office and invite her to take a seat, as Kathryn takes a seat beside her, and Cody takes a seat behind his desk. Then, with tears in her eyes, Julia begins to share the story of her father's tragic accident and his untimely death, and the horrible impact that it has had on her mother. "My mother and father have always been Christians, but after Mom lost Dad, it was like she totally forgot everything and everyone that she had ever known. She stopped going to church, instead opting to see psychics, attend seances, and even using Ouija boards. It was as if she was doing everything that she could to make contact with my father. I tried to talk to her Christian friends, and even our pastor tried to tell her that Dad was with the God that created him, so he wasn't hanging around this world, waiting on a spiritual charlatan to use him to make a buck off his family, but she refused to listen. Then last week she tells me that Dad's ghost appeared to her. She assures me that it was him, but I know that that thing wasn't my dad. She told me that this thing gave off a light that generated so much heat that it left burn marks in her skin. She also told me that it lashed out at her in anger and hate, and now, it's as if the same hate that consumed this thing that she described to me has begun consuming her. She has begun to lash out at me physically. She throws things at me, strikes me with her fists, jabs me with her fingers, and even pulls my hair. My mother has never been a violent person, especially not toward me." As she speaks, Julia begins to sob, obviously a woman who has reached her limit. "I'm so sorry," Cody says to Julia sympathetically as Kathryn reaches out, taking Julia into her arms. Finally, gaining her composure, Julia asks the couple, "Would you possibly be able to come by and see if there is anything that you can do to help? I mean, with your past experience with demons, I know that you're at least better equipped to deal with this thing than I am." "Of course, we will," Kathryn responds. "Just give me a few minutes to make an announcement here at the church, and make some quick phone calls, as I want some prayer warriors backing us up on this, but, yes, we'll be there shortly. Cody confirms. Please don't tell your mom that we're coming. I don't want to give this tormenting spirit a heads up. I won't. Thank you both so much, Julia says, first shaking hands with Cody, and then giving Kathryn another hug. Julia then exits Cody's office, and the young couple walk her to the church entrance. Though Julia is still visibly overwhelmed, she does seem more confident than she was when she had arrived. As Cody and Kathryn stand in the church foyer, watching Julia as she leaves, Cody begins talking aloud. Grief can be a powerful weapon when wielded by demonic forces. You may recall that Mark chapter 5 speaks about a man who was living in the tombs. It says that he was so full of demons that he couldn't be bound, not even with chains. The demonic voice that came from the man's mouth even identified itself as legion, stating that they were many. The term legion normally indicates a number between 4,200 to 6,000 troops, giving us an idea of how fully consumed by demons this poor man was. Many theologians believe that the fact that this man was living in the tombs is an indication that his possession began with the grief that he felt because of the loss of someone that he cared about. Then why does God equip demons with such a powerful weapon? Mr. Harden, the church usher, asks, trying to understand what he had just heard. God doesn't cause grief, for grief is but a side effect brought about by the loss of someone that we love, Cody explains, so the only way that God could remove grief is to remove love, and we both know that God would never do that, for God is love. Well, he could remove death. Usher Harden interjects, not really knowing the root cause of the discussion. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that death makes a powerful ally. Ally? Cody says, with the shake of his head, and a polite smile, I'm sorry, but God and death are not allies. Well, I hate to think so, but I've often heard preachers at funerals tell families that God took their loved ones from them, because God needed them. Cody, still politely shaking his head, tells Edward 1 Corinthians 15 verse 26 tells us that death is an enemy to God, so don't confuse their relationship. God doesn't take our loved ones from us, they are instead taken from this world by death. But as Christians, God takes them away from death, and he escorts them into heaven. Then, if God and death are not allies, why can't God simply remove death? Edward asks. Death can't be removed, because our sin enables it to exist. Edward, looking slightly confused, apologizes, I'm sorry, I know this is none of my business. No, please, I don't want to leave you with confusion, Edward. Please ask me anything that you would like. Mr. Harden then goes on, I know that God told Adam that the day that he ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil would be the day that they would die. But they didn't die. Instead, Adam and Eve lived many years after that, having and raising children. I know that it can be confusing, but please understand, Adam, Eve, and all of humanity that followed them suffered not only a spiritual death the day that they sinned, but also a physical one. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 8 tells us that one day to God is as 1,000 years to man. Adam, who was created to live eternally, died at the age of 930 years. That's right, in God's eyes, Adam didn't make it past his first day, so in retrospect he died the same day that he sinned. Methuselah, the oldest person to ever live, died at the age of 969, so again, if one day to God is as 1,000 years to man, he didn't make it past day one. God told us that the day that we sin would be the day that we die, and he was right, yet each and every one of us go right on sinning, using our free will as a license, an enablement, when in the end all that is enabled is our own death. With those words, Edward comes to the realization that God is not responsible for death, as he had always believed, nor is God responsible for the torment of those that are left behind. Instead, these things are the result of the human race embracing sin rather than embracing God. Chapter 3. The Calm Before the Storm. A few hours later, Cody and Kathryn pull up outside of the Rose residence in Claremore. At first glance, the home blends in with the many homes surrounding it. The well-manicured lawn, the beautifully maintained landscaping, the freshly power-washed bricks, even the medium to high-end architecture, are a far cry from the desolation of the old Bradbury estate, as it's just so unimposing in comparison. But as Cody and Kathryn walk into the house, the scene becomes a little more familiar. Not that the home is run down, or even out of order, but there is an all-too familiar demonic chill that permeates the atmosphere. The young pastors are taken aback as the supposedly demon-possessed Emily Rose approaches them. "Oh, wow, Julia, why didn't you tell me we had company? Aren't you going to introduce me to your young friends? These are the Newman's mother." Julia responds nervously. They are the assistant pastors of the Secret Place Community Church in Lancaster, she hesitantly adds. With these words, Cody catches a twinge somewhere behind Emily Rose's eyes, almost as if he is seeing a discomfort, not from Emily, but from that which is inside of her. "Lancaster, that is quite a way. Surely you didn't travel this far just to invite Julia and I to church. I mean, there are many churches right here in Claremore that we would be more apt to go to." Emily says politely yet sharply. "No, that wasn't the only reason that we came," Cody says, trying to read the spirit in the room. "We recently heard about the passing of your husband and we just wanted to offer you our condolences." "Yes, his death was quite a tragedy," Emily responds flatly. "Well, perhaps, but as the Apostle Paul expressed in Philippians 1 verse 23 and 24, to depart this life and be with Christ is far better for those that pass, but to stay on in the world is more needful for the loved ones that we leave behind." "Are you implying that my husband is better off without me?" Emily says harshly, cutting Cody off in mid-sentence. "No ma'am, not at all. I only meant—" "I know what you meant," Emily says, again cutting Cody off. "All of you do-gooders are the same. You want to tout about how great death is, yet I don't see any of you offing yourselves." At these words there is a change in Emily's voice as she, or more likely the demon inside of her, quotes Acts 19 verse 15 as it screams, "Jesus I know, and Paul, I know, but who are you?" The voice now coming from the woman's vocal cords does not mirror the polite lady that the Newmans had originally met, for it now has a deep and human raspy tone to it. "You know exactly who we are, devil. We are children of the living God, as is the woman that you are currently tormenting." "What, this old thing?" the demon says with a mocking laugh. "I only wear this when I don't care how I look." The demon looks at Cody through Emily's eyes, chomping her teeth in his direction. "You need to chill, boy, for I know exactly who you are. You don't defeat a demon, not even one of Agramon's lowly stature, without building a certain reputation. Lucky for me, though I am not as pathetic as Agramon is." Cody, recognizing that he has already given too much credence to this devil's words, bows his head, and he begins praying, both in his known earthly language, and in his unknown spiritual or heavenly language. As he does, the Spirit of God comes into the room, and the demon within Emily becomes visibly shaken. At that same moment a Claremore City patrol vehicle pulls up outside, and a young police officer steps out and walks up and into the house. Emily, or the spirit inside of Emily, looks at Cody and with a whisper tells him, "I served the prince of the power of the air," Ephesians 2 verse 2, "so I knew that you were coming long before you arrived." Emily then begins to cry out, summoning the young police officer. "Please, officer, remove these people from my home." "Yes, Mrs. Rose," the officer responds. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask the two of you to leave," the officer tells Cody and Kathryn very politely. "That's fine, officer," Cody says as he looks at Emily and speaks to the demon inside of her. "We wrestle not against flesh and blood," Ephesians 6 verse 12, "so you aren't going to defeat us through law enforcement, for they are not our enemies. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds." 2 Corinthians 10 verse 4. We already have enough prayer support to vanquish a legion of demons, so despite your confidence, you are already defeated. With those words, Cody and Kathryn step from the house, reassuring Julia that everything is going to be alright. "We are going to be staying at a local bed and breakfast tonight, and as you may recall, we have already enlisted a number of prayer warriors that will be fighting for you in our physical absence." Chapter 4. Prayer Support. Meanwhile, back in Lancaster, Pastor Holt steps behind the pulpit and addresses the prayer warriors that have gathered. "As most of you know, we have joined here today in order to support Cody and Kathryn in their battle against a demon in Claremore. I want all of you to understand that by coming here, we are making a declaration of spiritual warfare against demonic strongholds, but we are not alone. First off and foremost, in Matthew 28 verse 20 Jesus assures us that He is with us always, even unto the ends of the earth. We also have fellow Christian warriors, who may not be here with us physically, but who are with us in the Spirit, just as the Apostle Paul was with the early church in Colossians 2 verse 5. Cody and Kathryn Newman are our boots on the ground in the city of Claremore, so as we enter our prayer room, we shall meet our brethren at the throne of God, and we shall meet the adversaries of God head on. With those words, a spiritual gauntlet is tossed and spiritual battle lines are drawn. Pastor Holt then begins to read Ephesians chapter 6 verses 10 through 12. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The spiritual forces that we and our brethren face are also known as the prince of the power of the air, in Ephesians 2 verse 2. This prince, these powers, are currently on patrol over our loved ones in the city of Claremore, much as the prince of Persia was on patrol over Daniel in Daniel chapter 10 verses 12 and 13. Gabriel, the archangel, proclaimed, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But, lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. As Cody and Kathryn arrive at the Claremore bed and breakfast, there is a massive storm front moving in. Wow, Kathryn says, rather nervously. We better get inside. It looks as if it's getting ready to get bad. Cody smiles at his wife's comment, looking up at the sky himself. Yeah, I agree, Kathryn. It doesn't look good. With those words, the young couple enter the bed and breakfast, check in, and then going into their room, they take a seat on the foot of their bed. Kathryn turns on the TV to check the local weather. Good afternoon, this is meteorologist Alan Youngblood reporting from KNDE Superstation 4 in the city of Claremore. Doppler radar is currently showing the area clear of storm activity, despite the massive cloud covering darkening our city. I know that the darkness is concerning, but the fact that Doppler radar is not showing any activity is a good thing, as Doppler radar detects precipitation and strong winds, which at this point are not evident. Please stay tuned to KNDE Superstation 4 as I will continue watching potential storm activity and will keep our viewers abreast of any updates. Alright, there you go, Cody says to Kathryn, turning the television down. Kathryn pulls out her cell phone to call and check on Julia, Emily Rose's daughter. I just need to make sure that she is alright, Kathryn explains to Cody. When Julia answers the phone, she is audibly shaken, but she is safe. I just don't understand, Kathryn. I mean, when you and Cody were removed from the house, I just knew that I was going to die, yet it's as if my mother can't touch me. She even tried to scream at me, but though her lips moved, there was no sound that came out of her mouth. Please tell me what's going on. Kathryn takes a deep breath, and then responds, God has placed a hedge of protection around you, Julia. John 10 tells us that nothing can pluck you from the hand of God, so the demon that is within your mother is powerless against you. It can't touch you, or even intimidate you. Then what about my mother? Julia pleads. Why did God not protect her as He is me? Because you didn't push God away, nor did you embrace or cling to the demonic entity that you are battling against. God is going to deliver your mom, of that I have no doubt, but these things have to be broken off of her first. Jesus warned that if a person is delivered from demon possession, it will travel seeking a new home, and when it cannot find one, it returns back to that person that was delivered, bringing with itself 7 more demons worse than itself. Luke 11 verses 24 to 26. Sadly, your mother has to go through what she is going through right now, or else she would be even worse off. Suddenly the portable police scanner that Cody carries, a holdover from his dad's law enforcement days, sounds off. Claremore dispatch to Unit C7, please proceed to the west of the city to serve as an observation vehicle. The chief is pretty uneasy with this darkness suddenly developing overhead, so he wants to keep an eye on things just in case we need to hit the city sirens if funnel clouds suddenly develop. 10-4 dispatch, show me 101 or Robert. Unit C7 responds. Wow, so, Cody says to Kathryn, the weather service seems to be unconcerned, but the police department seem to be just the opposite. Kathryn interrupts her conversation with Julia, holds her hand over the mouthpiece of the phone. I'm sure it's nothing. I mean, the weather service knows what's going on. Unit C7 to dispatch. Go ahead C7, dispatch responds. I've arrived at the city limits, and this is odd. The darkness that is clearly impacting Claremore is evident, but only over the city. I mean, it goes from darkness to absolute light as you move out of the city, and it's not a gradual dissipation. It's as if the darkness is a wall or dome enveloping our town. 10-4 Unit C7. The dispatcher responds, glancing over her shoulder at Chief Bowers. Please maintain your current position. Unit C5. The chief has directed you to proceed to the easterly side of the city, and report once you have arrived. 10-4 Show me 1076. Unit C5 responds nonchalantly. Meanwhile, back in Lancaster, getting word of the demonic blockade over the city Claremore, Cody and Kathryn's prayer support begins calling down angelic bombardments, crying out for God to dispatch his angels from the north, the south, the east, and the west. Pierce the darkness that threatens our loved ones. Pastor Holt cries out to God. At this same time, Cody hears Claremore dispatch, once again coming over his old police scanner. Unit C7 and C5. Be advised that we are now receiving reports of lightning strikes in the clouds. Yet a call to the weather service indicates that they are not seeing it via radar. Kathryn, seeing the television throwing a screen alert for another weather report, turns the TV back up. Good afternoon, this is meteorologist Alan Youngblood again. I've been receiving reports of lightning strikes in the upper atmosphere over the city, but per geostationary lightning mapper satellites, no lightning has been detected. I have gone outside, and I do see the same thing that everyone else is seeing, but I can't explain it. I can tell you emphatically that these flashes are not lightning strikes, but I do urge everyone to take shelter, just in case, as I don't know exactly what we are dealing with here. Colonel Brian Henley of the Illinois Air National Guard called in as he is also receiving these reports, and though he assures me that air traffic control is showing that all is clear, he is scrambling a reconnaissance flight over the city to take a closer look. Please continue to stay tuned for updates as I will pass them on as they become available. Claremore dispatch, this is Unit C5. Be advised that I am seeing the same thing as Unit C7 is. It's as if there is a dark wall separating our community from the area just outside of the city. I see two of what appears to be military air units heading this way from the east. 10-4, we received word that Jackson Air Base was dispatching a patrol to do a pass-through. Claremore dispatch responds, well, be advised that they are here, and they just passed through the wall of darkness like it wasn't even there. Patrol Unit C5 responds. 10-4 Unit C5, please maintain your current position. We must get into prayer, Cody tells Kathryn, who is now off the phone. I don't know what's happening, but something is going on, and I don't think that it has anything to do with atmospheric pressure or weather fronts. Kathryn nods, then turns the television off as Cody turns out the lights, leaving the two of them in a darkened room. Allowing their eyes to focus, they begin pacing through the room, praying quietly at first, but then building momentum. Dear Heavenly Father, we don't know what we are up against, but you do, for the Bible tells us that nothing has ever shocked you off your throne or taken you by surprise. You, O Lord, know what it is that we face, and you are more than able to handle it, no matter what it is. As Cody prays in his known language, Kathryn transitions from her spoken words to her heavenly language, moving to a place that is beyond the atmosphere of darkness surrounding them, and delivering them into the presence of God. In the meantime, unknown to anyone on the ground, the two air units radio back to their tower. Tower, this is callsign static. I'm not sure what to make of what is happening here. I mean, we see the lightning flashes, but that's about it. It's as if we are flying through a tar-like substance, yet radar is showing clear. Acknowledged static, our radar is clear as well, the tower responds. This is callsign Packrat, the second air unit chimes in. But as Packrat starts to talk to the tower, he is suddenly interrupted. Static, did you see that? What the heck was that? Static responds. It looked like the outline several dark figures or outlines of some sort that were visible in the flash of lightning strikes. Acknowledged static and Packrat, the tower responds. Packrat and static, this is a recall. Jackson Air Base control tower calls out. Return to base. We don't need you flying up there with no clear indication of what hazards may be present. Command is routing ground units with anti-aircraft weapons as well as low air gunships to monitor the situation. Acknowledged tower, we are returning to base. Static replied. Suddenly the police scanner, which had been silent, comes to life again. Dispatch, this is Unit C5. Be advised that those aircraft have apparently completed their fly-through. It appears they are heading back to base. 10-4. Unit C5. Remain at your current location until we receive confirmation of what is happening. 10-4. Dispatch. Chief Bowers, the chief of police for the city of Claremore in the meantime is on the phone with Jackson Air Base, but he is apparently having issues getting Colonel Henley on the phone. Look Airman, I understand that Colonel Henley is a busy man, and I know that you have a lot going on right now, but so do we. I am the chief of police of the city that is currently covered by that apparent undetectable cloud cover. Chief Bowers sighs heavily and then responds to the unheard voice on the other end of the phone, yes, I'll hold. Several minutes later a voice calls out over the scanner, dispatch, this is Unit C5. Be advised there are several military-grade helicopters in the distance, and I can see multiple military trucks, some armored personnel carriers etc. heading my way. The dispatcher turns and looks at Chief Bowers. Get on the phone and call all off-duty officers in. I don't know what's going on, but the military saw something. I'm getting in my car, and I'm going to track down where these green boys, making a snide remark about military fatigues, set up camp, and I'll radio you with my location. Will do, Chief. Please be safe out there, the dispatcher says. Chapter 5. The Final Conflict. Chief Bowers sees an array of military vehicles and helicopters in the high school parking lot, so he wheels his patrol vehicle in, but is stopped almost immediately by military security. I'm sorry, sir, the soldier who stops Chief Bowers says, this is a restricted area. No, it's not, Chief Bowers challenges, this is our local high school. I want to talk to who's in charge here, as I want some answers, and I want them now, Chief Bowers demands. At this same time, the prayer warriors, gathered in Lancaster, hit a crescendo in prayer and begin proclaiming the promises of God. If God be for us, who can be against us? Pastor Holt cries out, quoting Romans 8 verse 31. Another prayer warrior proclaims, Jesus told us that he could call down 12 legions of angels, making reference to Matthew 26 verse 53. So as we gather here in defense of Pastors Cody and Kathryn, we call upon those angels to bombard the forces of darkness. While still another calls out, God will never leave us nor forsake us, quoting Hebrews 13 verse 5. As someone else proclaims, thanks be to God, which giveth us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ, quoting 1 Corinthians 15 verse 57. As their prayers intensify, so does the spiritual bombardment that is taking place against the blackness covering the city of Claremore. Then, at the same moment that Chief Bowers steps out of his patrol vehicle, a lone voice among the prayer warriors calls out, and the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And as if in answer to this reference to John 1 verse 5, a shaft of light suddenly penetrates the atmosphere, as does the sound of an angelic choir caught up in praise and worship to the greatness of their and our God. As the angelic praise echoes throughout Claremore, soldiers begin putting their weapons aside, as they kneel or lift their hands, joining in worship with the angels. Even Chief Bowers finds himself in prayer to a God that he has not spoken to since he was a child. Meanwhile, back at the bed and breakfast, Pastor Kathryn walks over and flips the switch, turning the lights back on in their room. Pastor Cody looks at her and confirms, it's time. The young couple quickly leave the inn that they are staying in, and they are met with the most beautiful collection of voices that they have ever heard. What is that? Cody asks aloud. I don't know, Kathryn responds as she searches the sky, trying to figure out where the singing is coming from. The music seems to come from every direction, enveloping the town with a spiritual purity that has not previously been known. Cody and Kathryn see soldiers, law enforcement officers and citizens alike join in worship, uplifting their hands, praying, crying out to the God that far too many have not spoken to in years. What is happening? Kathryn asks. I believe that the darkness we saw was not an atmospheric or weather anomaly, it was instead a demonic covering. Notice that it did not dissipate, it instead seems to have been eradicated. It's as if the demonic oppression that exists throughout the world has suddenly been cast out, at least here. So the people are now experiencing true spiritual freedom for the first time. Within minutes, Cody and Kathryn arrive at Emily Rose's home, but this time they can feel an angelic entourage escorting them through the front door. Emily, well, not so much Emily but the demonic influence over her, is cowering in the floor, tears streaming from her eyes. As she sees Cody, she lunges at him in a fit of rage, but an angel instantly steps between them, knocking the demon backwards, launching her from Emily's body, setting her free from his captivity. Emily, feeling herself free, runs toward Cody and Kathryn and falls on her knees before them, not in worship, but out of physical and spiritual exhaustion, similar to the events that are depicted in Luke 8 verses 26 to 39, when the demon-possessed man fell at Jesus' feet in the Gadarenes. The demon in the meantime catapults itself back into Emily and finds itself on its knees before Cody, looking up at him. Cody, looking at Emily, tells her soothingly, "What I am about to say to you, I speak not to you, but to the demon that is oppressing you." Cody then speaks again, not as a mere man, but as a man indwelt by the Holy Spirit, a man given authority by the one true God. "What is your name, demon?" "I am Astaroth, the High Duke of Hell, ally to Beelzebub and right hand to Lucifer himself. You are nothing to me, Cody Newman, for yes, I know your name, and I know your lineage, and may I say I am not impressed," the demon says menacingly, doing his best to intimidate the young pastor. Cody smiles at the demon's words, for he recognizes his meaningless threat is just that, meaningless. "You speak out of fear, devil, for you know the one that lives within me. You speak of my lineage, you are right, you do know my lineage, for you walked away from him long ago. My lineage, devil, is God himself, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, for he is my Father, and he is your undoing. You say that you are the Duke of Hell, then go there." As soon as the words leave Cody's mouth, Emily collapses on the floor, utter exhaustion and dehydration kicking in. Emily begins coughing and spitting small amounts of vomit from her mouth as she grabs her stomach, suffering from apparent cramps. Cody and Kathryn run to Emily's side, comforting her and praying over her, placing a spiritual barrier or covering around her. Julia comes running toward her mom. When Kathryn steps in front of her, "Please, Julia, just stay back, at least until your mother has time to recover. She's going to be all right, but it is going to take her a little bit of time." Julia buries her head in Kathryn's shoulder, sobbing, not quite sure what to say or how to feel. "Julia," Emily says in a quivering voice, "I'm going to be all right, at least I am now." Emily then smiles for the first time since this demonic possession took place. Cody scoops Emily up into his arms and carries her to her bed, accompanied by Kathryn and Julia, laying her down. "Please, get her something to drink and something to eat because she has gone without nutrition since she fell victim to this thing." "I'll get it," Kathryn says to Julia comfortingly. "You stay here with your mom, she needs you right now." Kathryn then stops, smiles at Julia lovingly and says, "You have your mother back." Kathryn and Julia then hug, tears running down both of their faces. Kathryn then walks from the room to get everyone something to eat and drink. "Your mom is going to need some help working through her grief, so I am going to put you in contact with a friend of mine, a Dr. Felton. He is a local Christian counselor, as your mom doesn't need to open herself up to this type of influence again. Also, Kathryn and I will be sticking around town for a few days, as both of you are going to need some Christian brethren, and I want to ensure that both of you are strong enough to face any adversary that you may encounter. So we are going to be praying for each of you to receive the Holy Ghost, after each of you have a little time to recover physically." These events marked the beginning of a spiritual revival in the city of Claremore, a type of reunification between God and his people, Emily and her God, and yes, Julia and her mother. As Joseph had said in Genesis chapter 50 verse 20, what was intended to harm, God intended for good.